Hi there, my name is Bob McDermid and I'm the programmer for the I Write Book Festival in Glasgow. On March 24th this year we were hoping to have the launch of Imagine a Country by Val McDermid and Professor Joe Sharp. It was going to be a terrific evening. We had contributors to the book like Stuart Cosgrove, Jackie Kay, Louise Welsh, Chris Brookmyre, Phill Jupitus and Bill Sweeney all lined up, and more than 20 other contributors going to be in the audience. Now, as you all know, this unfortunately was not to be, and so instead Val and Joe have put together a little online version of the event. Hopefully I'll see you all again very soon at a book festival somewhere in the not too distant future. Until then, stay safe and let your imagination free.
Tonight we should have been in the Mitchell Library in Glasgow launching Imagine a Country as part of the I Write Festival. But events have overtaken us, and instead here we are in Edinburgh. However, it's our intention still to launch Imagine a Country with exactly the kind of event you would have had live in Glasgow.
Except, of course, you can sit on a comfy chair.
Indeed, and you won't break your self-isolation.
Indeed.
So this book started at the end of last summer with a few glasses of red wine late in the evening after a day at the Edinburgh Book Festival.
Doesn't seem like us.
I know, it's hard to believe. Those who know us will find this quite extraordinary that drink was involved in the process. But we'd spent a few days over the preceding week or so at the Edinburgh Book Festival where the theme was we need new stories. The idea being that I suppose what you'd call the right, or what you'd call the authoritarian wing of the world's politics, had taken over the agenda with their fake news and deep fakes, and telling us lies basically, but telling them in such a way that they appealed to an awful lot of people. And we thought it was time that the other voices were heard. What we got used to was people kind of shouting at each other from their silos, everything being turned into binaries. And we felt that what we'd heard over the week or so before this was a message of hope and imagination. And we wanted to restore that, I suppose, to civic discourse. And we sat there in this summer's evening thinking about how we might do this. And somebody in the room said,
why don't we do a book? And it seemed that so much of political discussion was taking place in 280 characters or less. And that if you didn't agree with me, therefore you were other, you were different, you were in an oppositional position. And it seemed that the opportunity to discuss ideas, to listen to one another, to have robust debate and arguments, again, if you know us well, that won't come as a surprise, but that were respectful and that involved listening and perhaps on occasion changing your own position to a shift in understanding. And it seemed that level of discussion had disappeared to some extent from political debate.
And from public discourse generally.
Yes.
And so we thought, wouldn't it be interesting to ask people in Scottish civic society what kind of society they'd like to live in, what kind of country they wanted to be part of. We're at a time of political flux in general, not just in Scotland, but all around the world. And we thought, wouldn't it be fun to see what people chose if they had the chance to express their own hopes, their own dreams, their own vision. And so we had this crazy idea of putting together an anthology of short pieces doing just that.
And it's not in any way supposed to be an agenda. There's not an overriding vision. It's not from the political left, it's not from the political right, it's not sort of straightforwardly an independence camp or in a unionist camp or I shouldn't have done that, should I?
No, you shouldn't have done that. I'm gonna slap you down for doing finger quotes. Okay. We're not those sort of people. So there is no particular political perspective in this collection.
That's what I was trying to say.
I know that's what you were trying to say, but failing. And what we were saying there about discourse and agreement, and yes, well, anyway, so but we wanted as wide a selection of people as we could come up with at short notice, because that was the crucial thing here. We wanted this to happen quickly. We didn't want it to be one of those things that got kicked around for 2 years and then sort of everyone got fed up with by the time it came out.
So the idea came to us at the end of August 2019. What, 7 months ago? It seems like a lifetime ago, given what's happened since. But we sent out our invitations to our contributors at the end of September. And Val rather wittily suggested that their vision was to come in by Halloween. We really were very anxious, first of all, whether anyone would think this was a worthwhile endeavour, whether anyone was going to reply and say yes. And secondly, the extent to which people would engage with the ideas that we kind of thrown out there. And we were both absolutely bowled over by the response that we had. The generosity, the imagination, and the excitement that people put into their writing has just been phenomenal.
And just to recap on what Joe was saying there about generosity, the proceeds from this book are going to be divided between 5 Scottish charities. None of the contributors is being paid. Joe and I are not being paid. Whatever money the book raises will go to these 5 Scottish charities: Shelter Scotland, Scottish Book Trust, Reforesting Scotland, Scottish Women's Aid, and Refugee.
Yes.
When we started on this project, we had no idea that it would arrive in a world so drastically altered by the recent events of COVID-19. And in a way, this book seems even more apposite now. The ideas in this book, the ideas are coming together and thinking about the kind of society we want to live in, the kind of country we want to live in, the kind of world we want to live in, just seems all the more necessary now that we're all thrust back on our own resources until we get to the end, or till we get to the next phase of this challenge that we're facing at the moment.
So what would you have written if you'd written a contribution?
So I would suggest a world where the arts are regarded as being as important as any other branch of civic life. As important as science, as important as politics, as important as economics. Because without stories, without that means of communication, we will continue to live in our silos and not understand each other.
Oh, I thought you just want Wraith Rovers to win the league.
That's just a bonus.
I would like everyone to have the opportunity to engage with passion with education throughout their lives. I think we're at a really important point at the moment in thinking what education is for, who it's for. It's not, I think, just to prepare people for the marketplace, for jobs after they leave school or after university, but education should be something, I think, that drives us with enthusiasm, with curiosity and passion through our lives. And I would definitely like to imagine a country where we all have those opportunities, as I say, throughout our lives, and not just whilst we're in various different institutions. And of course, I would like a truly quiet coach on trains.
You would, wouldn't you? So I'd encourage you to buy this book, to borrow this book, to read this book. There are things in it that will infuriate you, there are things in it that will make you passionately excited, and there are things that will make you stop and think, I believe. That certainly was my experience in reading the contributions as they came in. And because this is a launch, and because we want to give you a flavour of what the book's about and what it's like, the contributors who would have been with us on stage tonight had we been at the Mitchell Library in Glasgow as part of I Write, have agreed to read their pieces for you. And that's what you're going to hear next, is them reading what they've contributed to the book, and also some of their own thoughts about the whole process that's been involved in putting this book together and getting it out there. Lastly, we just want to thank everyone who's been involved in this process. The contributors, our amazing team at Canongate, who have moved heaven and earth to turn this around so quickly. And last but not least, Bob McDermid and the team at I Write for putting together an event that would have been amazing in the flesh, and we hope you've enjoyed in the virtuality.
And don't turn off before the end, because there's bonus content on this video.
Yes. Okay?
Yeah.
Is that all right?
Yeah, well, we'll find out.
Hello, I'm Chris Brookmyre. Here's my copy of Imagine a Country, and this is my contribution to Imagine a Country. To build a better future for a country, you need to look to the new generations that will populate it. And I believe one of the most valuable things we could do for them would be to introduce the teaching of philosophy from primary school age. One of the most corrosive effects of social media and the self-curation of our news consumption that it's facilitated has been the footballification of our political discourse. People who might otherwise have expressed little interest in an issue and who often retain a lack of curiosity over the complex detail are nonetheless encouraged to take sides and to regard politics as a zero-sum game in which the other team must be defeated at all costs. Any amount of misbehaviour, dishonesty and hypocrisy is excused as long as it's in the service of your side's success. Indeed, getting away with terrible behaviour is in itself viewed as a form of victory, a demonstration of strength. Through philosophy, children would learn to take the tribalism out of discourse. It teaches them how to think, not what to think. How to evaluate ideas according to their merits, logic and insight, as opposed to the adversarial instinct that causes us to defend ideas because we feel personally invested in them or tribally identified with them. It would be invaluable if our children could learn to confront challenges to their arguments without the fear of losing face, and to understand that it's not a sign of weakness or surrender to change your mind on the basis of new information or changing circumstances. And if all of this sounds implausibly idealistic, it may surprise you to learn that it's been tried before on opposite sides of the globe. In Australia in 1997, Buranda State School in Brisbane introduced a philosophy programme involving structured debates addressing philosophical questions the kids themselves had come up with. The children's academic test results improved considerably and were maintained or improved upon in the years that followed. However, perhaps more significant was the impact on social behaviour. According to a report on the programme, and I quote, "The respect for others and the increase in individual self-esteem generated in the community of inquiry have permeated all aspects of school life. We now have few behavioural problems, and we do have some difficult students. Students are less impatient with each other, they're more willing to accept their own mistakes as a normal part of learning, and they discuss problems as they occur. A visiting academic commented, 'Your children don't fight, they negotiate.' Visitors to the school are constantly making reference to the feel or spirit of the place. We believe it's the way our children treat each other." End quote. A similar experiment was carried out right here at home with equal success. In 2001 to 2002, a number of primary schools in Clackmannanshire, including ones in deprived areas, took part in an experiment whereby 11 to 12-year-olds were given 1 hour a week of philosophy teaching. The study involved a wide range of tests and was observed in comparison with a control group of schools with no such philosophy programme. The study found that after 1 year, the incidence of children supporting opinion with evidence doubled, but the control classes remained unchanged. There was evidence that children's self-esteem and confidence rose markedly. Class ethos and discipline improved noticeably. All classes improved significantly in verbal, non-verbal and quantitative reasoning, while no control class changed. Children were assessed as being more intelligent by an average of 6.5 IQ points after 1 year on the programme. Most significantly, those benefits were retained by the pupils even after they moved on to secondary school, even though no such philosophy teaching followed them to their new schools. We are living in what might be called the information age, bombarded with data, with ideas and opinions as never before. I imagine a country whose future generations are equipped to process this information, to evaluate it and to reach valid conclusions. Most importantly, they would learn how to respond when someone else reaches different conclusions.
The long view. When you were born, my daughter, my son, the half moon grinned and the sun shone. You came after a long song of a labour of years and years, and then some. It was July when you at last appeared, hanselled with the mace from Her Majesty, ma'am, good day, bright-eyed, flushed, new as day, and the crags at your tiny feet, and Arthur's seat. When you were born, bairn, red owls flew over your city, and everyone you met, pet, wanted to join you on your journey, between the lochs and the ferns, between the braes and the bens, between the crofts and the bothies, between the rowans and the pines, between the high-rise and the tenements and the wimpy houses in the big cities, between the north and the south, the east and the west, and the land and the sea. Now, I know of someone in Cologne, Ardnamurchan, who remembers an old Cologne man saying that he remembers an old Cologne woman who'd once seen all the houses ablaze, and these were the first of your days. Stories to keep the past alive, a poem read aloud to knock the future's door, a song sung by Sheena Wellington for all that. You're 20 now. We couldn't be prouder. Look how you've grown in stature. This is about who we are, how we carry ourselves, your godfather's premonition the day you were born. We are not a people that takes to the compliment well. Put it this way, you're 20. You've carried yourself well. 20 years on, what can I tell you about your birth? Your birth was a process, not an event. Your wee form emerged between the land and the stone, a citizen already sitting, seen through the portal. And the boats carried you out to see what you could see, and back to the land, to the bottom of the Royal Mile. Every way you turned, your smile made others smile. And if at first you faced ridicule and some were hostile, you held your own and carried on. Groundbreaking land reform, first up with the smoking ban, and on. Remember the jubilation when same-sex marriage passed, when Clause 28 was opposed? Look how you shone the light on the darkness of abuse, how you had such a clear vision. And you let all Scotland out and modern Scotland in, first footing. Nane for thee a thocht despairing, earth, thou bonny brookit bairn. You knew what was right and what was wrong, and oh, how your citizens sang their song. Under the common weal, we'll, under the common weal, we'll thrive. Oh, it was a braw-bricht day when you arrived, alive, wee Wayne, under the common sun, doon, where you'd been currying doon, under democracy's moon, wee Wayne, hoping that Othin would be fine, and you'd get to tell your story, wee Wayne, who ken already what was richt and what was wrong, wee Wayne. Look how you've grown up michty fine, oh my darling, you'll aye be my trusty feary when the darkness descends, when the McPhees roar and the Lochans sing, wee Wayne, and ye sing to make the world a better place. Oh my country, you will always be loved and respected by me, loved and respected by me, oh my country, my country. Scotland itself is my country, said Sorley MacLean. My other country is Ireland, and after it, France, our great Gaelic bard said plainly. And if he were still alive today, maybe, he'd have been compelled to name the other 25 countries. Scotland itself is my country, and 20 years on, my country has changed. I remember it once being a country I ran from. In those days, you felt unwelcome. You passed. You pretended. You kept your mouth shut unless you sang, sing if you're glad to be gay, sing if you're happy that way. And now, look, old Scotland is no more. Gay men kiss at the Parliament's door. Hope travels all the way around the world. Hope has people it wants to meet, hands to shake. Hope flies to New Zealand, to the South Island in solidarity. Hope wears a hijab and speaks out against hate. Hope comes home, finds a hearth, a country ahead of its time, looking out across the land and the years, across the cold North Sea, where the waves knit in plain and pearl, is a country to sing you a lullaby, a country to rock you awake. My country has started to speak my language, and I am no longer alone. I used to feel a foreigner in my own land. I used to feel not at home. I used to be a stranger in the mirror. I used to talk to the hand when the mouth wasn't listening. And now you get what I'm saying, how difficult it is for me on some occasions. But these days, you're listening up, and I'm not cordoned off. The door is open, and I've come ben this bonny chamber. A nod to you two, and you, for taking the long view. and the mountains are speechless if what they say cannot be understood, and the many-voiced ocean is silent if no one knows its language. It must be a bizarre thing being in the same room as all these people who share the same birthday as you, everybody dressed up and looking so fine. And when you were born, Nicola, in the middle of the day between Wimbledon and the opening of Scottish Parliament, you were induced. It was a quick birth, and your gran jumped over a wall to tell all you were a girl. And the Heelan cow jumped over the moon, and the dish ran away with a wooden spoon. And you're the future. Parliament's bairns, sworn in that hot July day in '99. The grass is greener in Scotland, Callum said. The milk is better and the people friendlier, he said. It's nice that people can be themselves, Megan said, and not be afraid. I'm excited, said Alika Hermanowska in her dear Scottish Parliament letter, to see what the future brings. Here's to the next 20 years. Under the common wheel, we're taking the long view. Under the common wheel, we're taking the long view. Under the common wheel, we're taking the long view.
Drumchapel High, beginning of term 2035. The Hede addresses the staff. Welcome back, all of you, and special greetings to new colleagues who have joined us this year to lead our refreshed core subject area, Praxis, Poetics and Philosophy. We particularly look forward to your support for those remaining members of our former English department as they transition from those old and discredited exam-based mechanisms and acquaint themselves more closely with modern practice-based methodologies. Last year's achievements in the essential core subjects were again outstanding. Drama leading the way with last December's epic cycle of classic Davy Gregg plays. Who could have guessed that Year 2 students could handle the rhyming couplets of Prudentia Hart with such maturity and elan? But of course, music and art also made their mark, especially Year 5's monumental fusion of giant kinetic sculptures with surround sound design, which has been delighting this summer's visitors to the Peel Glen Immersive Arts Park. Amazing how these vintage Mac iPads were coaxed into life again. Remember staring at these wee screens? And running classic retro Max MSP patches to integrate the tourist's aesthetic reactions into the sound, colour and movement shaping. A literally moving experience. The poets and creative writers also contributed strongly. Their engagement with both preschool playgroups and the mature citizens' lunch and after clubs have greatly enhanced the great art of living together locally, inspiring emulation by many other schools across our modern housing and living schemes, even beyond Glasgow. Following this experience, and with the integration of English studies into PP and P, we hope that internal pedagogical struggles become a thing of the past, and that champions of the creative approach no longer feel the need to call for separation or emancipation from what they, perhaps a little cruelly, refer to as Govite hegemony. Of course, I could go on with these listings, well recognised over the past few years by the Scottish Transcendental Education Authority when it conferred its whole school collective recognition awards on our staff student community. But I must stress our continued appreciation for the work of our colleagues in the non-core subjects. It's too easy for us to imagine that all arithmetical and purely analytical work can now go the way of regurgitation of known stuff subject areas along with their testing regimes. We have had warning signs that handing over too much initiative to the AI bots that we now rely on for our day-to-day repetitive and uncreative tasks can occasionally have unexpected outcomes. Certainly, we still await an explanation of why the culinary arts area bot chose that particular dimly lit corridor to announce a fire drill in the style of Nina Simone in Mississippi Goddam. We're assured that Mr. Matheson is now recovering well, but it's suspected that a rogue humour line of code may have been inserted by the theatre bot, which is now being inspected for any lingering signs of the Chick-Murray virus, which so disrupted last year's T.S. Eliot Memorial Day. So, we will continue to argue for the non-core subjects, but not only to assist with AI. We can point to many instances where the contribution has enhanced the core educational work. Miss McNiven tells us that after the jazz ensemble enrolled en masse in the mental arithmetic holiday camp this July, their grasp of George Russell's Lydian chromatic theory of tonal organisation just clicked into place. And she expects giant steps forward at the All Scotland Thelonious Monkathon being hosted by the Tommy Smith International Jazz Institute in Wester Hailes next month. Similarly, the gender-neutral seven-a-side football teams benefited hugely from Mr. Reid's Trigonometry Breakfast Club. They'll be showing off their innovative tangential tactics at the charity fundraising tournament for New Cathkin Park. And isn't it inspiring how the whole community has come together to help the old firm relocate to their eco-ground share after Parkhead was repurposed as a library? And good news too that the Ozymandias Society has rescued Ibrox from the bulldozers to preserve it as a living ruin. I also hear that our science collective are chipping in this year with a molecular chemistry and the iambic pentameter weekend, real alchemy in action. So let's stop the sidelining of the non-core subjects. Let's remind ourselves that our pedagogy is based on the foundations of Prof. John Butt's pioneering concept of ULOs, unintended learning outcomes. And remember too that a good Scots education must always be a rounded experience, always embodying the essential core of the 3 R's: rhyme, reason and rhythm. So, good wishes to you all for the creative year to come. If there are no questions, then let's all head down to the Maxwell Geddes Holistic Audio Complex for the rest of the morning, while the students organise our timetables.
I'm Stuart Cosgrove, a writer and broadcaster and contributor to Imagine a Country, Ideas for a Better Future. I had the idea that I wanted to put forward quite quickly in the process the day after I was asked to write it, because I was walking through a local park, Alexandra Park, in the east side of Glasgow where I live, and I noticed this area down in the park that gave me the inspiration. What always touches me emotionally is a small cluster of trees near the right-hand entrance to the park, as it drops down to a duck pond in the children's play area. At the foot of the trees are dying bouquets of flowers, sodden soft toys and rain-stained letters from grieving mothers to their dead children. Over several years now, women who have experienced stillbirths and miscarriages have used the trees as a makeshift garden of remembrance, a place to cry and think about the child that might have been. The messages they leave are heartbreaking and are often laced with primitive and deeply distressing poetry. In the cold, frosty days around Christmas, the messages reappear again, sometimes with small gifts and whispered words of love from Santa, and from kind relatives. Your Auntie Julie bought this because she thought you'd like it. Play forever, my darling daughter. The unresolved sorrow lies deeper than the snow.
Anyway, the chapter that I wrote is entitled Homework. Homework. Terrible word, isn't it? The bane of every child's evening and holiday. Which then, of course, gets bounced onto the terrified parent. Mum, can you please help me with my maths? Let's look at the word, though. Homework. An unholy collision of a noun and a verb. The place where one lives. Home. Combined with an activity which one usually does under duress. Work. We work because we have to, either to earn a wage or those day-to-day tasks which one has to do as a matter of course. The work one is assigned as a child is a continuation of what's being taught in class. Part of the aim of homework is to teach the child how to work in isolation. Also, it's supposed to encourage self-motivation and responsibility. To me, this has always felt akin to those people who throw newborn babies into swimming pools because they believe they will instinctively swim. I remember vividly how I didn't really understand what was being asked of me at big school. Nobody ever just explained what homework was. Nobody had ever mentioned it at junior school either, and the battle-hardened teachers at secondary school just threw you in. It was sink or swim. I sank. I've always been of the opinion that school should stay on for another hour until 4:30, or start earlier like in France. So, homework could be done in an environment where one had the help of trained professionals, rather than the hazy memories of somebody who never did better than scraping a C- in most subjects who is also trying to cook your tea. I realise that this is naive in the extreme. The world of education today is a minefield of form-filling and target-based achievement, tests and inspections. Most teachers I know have 10 times more homework than their unruly charges. It is far from ideal. But I'm blue sky thinking here. A well-educated society thrives. For students in England, going into higher education carries with it the prospect of a whopping 5-figure debt at the end of the studies. How many great minds are we missing out on because of this system and its associated fear of debt? Why aren't more people asking that question? I would like to live in a world where education was valued more, where everybody understood that to get the best, we need to give everybody a shot. The net of education needs to be cast wide. Learning becomes something to be looked forward to rather than dreaded, where the sterile metric of test results is not the only means of judging potential. The problems that the world faces are many. Society is in dire need of people equipped to solve them. I think that the way we get there is by investing hard cash in education and teachers. I realise that this is but the fever dream of my poor Brexit, Trump, COVID-19 battered mind. 4 years of confusion, doubt, fear, lies, plague and shrill hyperbole will do that to you. When I'm not thinking about how we might start to fix things, I drift off into dreams of Eton College having an Ofsted inspection. Well, headmaster, we can't help but notice that 2 of your pupils have plunged the United Kingdom into the most hideous constitutional shitstorm in living memory. So I am afraid it's going to be special measures. If fucking only.
Hello everybody, I'm Louise Welsh and this reluctant hostage to fortune is Minnie, who's cheering us all up during the current lock-in. You didn't want to be locked in. Okay, this is Imagine a Country, and I am really, really pleased to have been asked to be involved with this. My contribution is called Big Rock Candy Mountain. Oh, the buzzing of the bees and the sycamore trees and the soda water fountain, where the lemonade springs and the bluebird sings in the Big Rock Candy Mountain. The trouble with capitalism is that for all of its insistence on the labour of others, the system itself doesn't work. Now, clever economists will counter this statement with statistics and explanations of capital accumulation, competitive markets, price systems and the like. But I stick by my assertion. Capitalism is not designed to create a country in which everyone lives well. More than that, capitalism is not concerned with enabling individuals to realise their talents. The concentration of power, profit, land and other assets in private hands and the absolute belief in the need for wealth in order to live well means that self-interest groups promote their own. Many of those in key roles, the people whose judgment and ability we rely on, sit shonkily on seats of power. Unfortunately for us, a big bum on a shugly stool isn't akin to a jacket hanging from a shugly peg. The bastards at the top clench their buttocks, brace their thighs, and ride on, incompetent, entitled, oblivious. Capitalism's obsession with profit skews values. Society pays lip service to the injustice of nurses being paid less than bankers. We wring our hands over the essential workers who can't live within the bounds of the cities they serve, the rough sleepers who punctuate our pavements, the rural homeless living year-round in caravans while second homes sit unoccupied. These situations are inevitable when profit is God and people valued for what they have rather than what they do. But they're not inevitable per se. There are possible alternatives should we choose to embrace them. I wrote this on a cold day at the start of winter. First frost glittered Glasgow's tenement rooftops, and minutes from my office people sat wrapped in blankets on pavements, begging. We know routes to homelessness are complex. They include inadequate wages, unemployment, late benefit payments, abuse, family breakdown, illness, mental health difficulties, addiction, and more. We know that for every person we see on the street, there are many more, including families with children, sofa surfing, or living in temporary or inadequate housing. In my perfect country, property isn't regarded as capital. My perfect country is a place of low rents, warmed rooms, shared resources, affordable joined-up public transport where education is free to all. My perfect country gives individuals the confidence and resources to discover their talents. In my perfect country, it's distasteful to be wealthy. Individuals are respected for what they do, regardless of their job title. After all, a society where refuse collectors are not appreciated is a society that's forgotten the smell of its own shit. And while we're on the subject of shit, as J.K. Galbraith points out, it's the only thing that trickles down in trickle-down economics. Is my desire for a non-capitalistic country a simplistic, impossible dream? Dream on. Keep dreaming on. I'm bound to go where there ain't no snow, where the rain don't fall and the wind don't blow, in the big rock candy mountain.
How easy was it to settle on this topic? Well, given that there was a very tight deadline, that helped a lot, because having said, oh yes, I would love to contribute to something like this, you then really have to get down to it. And I've always, throughout my career, been involved not just with creative work, but creative work in education in many different forms. So I wanted to centre it on that.
Really, I thought a lot, and then it was very easy, because I guess the topic's based on observations of the world, and I've always thought that capitalism is a really inadequate, a really shonky, a really selfish system. It doesn't work.
It was fairly quick, fairly instant to decide this was what I would suggest, and I think it comes from an interest I had in philosophy from watching my son grow up. And I remember back in the early 2000s reading a fantastic wee book by Professor Stephen Law called The War for Children's Minds. And that's where I got a lot of the information about the school's programmes that involved philosophy. And that led me to reading some other books that Stephen Law had written, such as The Philosophy Gym, and that just had lots of little potted pieces of philosophy and questions that kids might ask themselves. And it just struck me as something that would have an immeasurably beneficial effect, because you can't really argue with that level of evidence, the fact that it improved children's behaviour, but it also equipped them with a whole other degree of means to learn, which was proven by the results after that, when they continued on through school. And that's stayed with me for years.
Well, bearing in mind that 2 former pupils of Eton College have presided over what I consider to be the disintegration of the United Kingdom through self-interest, incompetence, and the preservation of their privilege and class, I would say it was very easy to be inspired. I think that in general, boarding schools are, when they are necessary for reasons. I know that the school I was at, people in the military wanted to school their children at home, and so military boarding schools were the thing. But this notion that you just send kids away to get an education and you don't have to be bothered with them is, I find it vile. That's just a personal view, I have to say. And so, yeah, it was born of my hatred of boarding schools. It was really weird. I was reading and very much enjoying Stephen Fry's Moab Is My Washpot, which was his first volume of his autobiography. And as soon as it got to the bit talking about his school and how much he loved it, put it down, never picked it up again. Stephen thinks they're a good thing. I think they're a bad thing. I think that the time that you should be with your family is those awkward teenage years, and you should power through it together rather than farm your children out to strangers. Anyway, so that was the inspiration.
I settled on this topic of my contribution because I was actually asked to write a poem to celebrate 20 years of the Scottish Parliament, and I read that on that occasion. And it seemed to me that it would fit perfectly into this wonderful idea that Val and Joe both had of imagining a country, because what I was doing when I was writing that poem was imagining my country and taking my country back and forward through past the last 20 years and on to potentially the future 20 years. The poem was written in 4 voices, and it was performed by 4 different people on that day in July last year for the 20th anniversary in 2019. Suzanne Bonner was wonderful. She sang part of it. There was a wonderful young Gaelic man from Lewis who was fantastic, and he read part of the poem in Gaelic, and there was a woman who sang part of the poem, and that was wonderful too. I really wanted to write a multi-voice poem because I see myself as a kind of multi-voiced macker, not just to represent a single voice, mine, but to represent lots. And it seemed really important that sign language should be in the poem too, since it's the other official language of Scotland, along with Gaelic. And I wanted to actually cheer the wonderful achievements of the Scottish Parliament, the ways that we've done so much. I wanted to celebrate that in the poem, but I also wanted not to be rosy-eyed and to actually look at some of Scotland's faults in the past. And I had, as a young black lesbian growing up, felt quite uncomfortable in my country, and so it felt important to say that too. So it was, yeah, it's a long poem. It lasted, I think, about 7 or 8 minutes that day. Suzanne sang brilliantly. You can probably catch it if you YouTube it, but it was quite an occasion, and the Queen was there.
Was there any particular inspiration the inspiration really is what I see as I walk around. But in 2017, Zoe Strachan and I collaborated with some writers who had experienced homelessness on a collection and anthology for I Write called Home Ground, and we did this with the Mitchell Library. It was Glasgow's big read, and 10,000 copies were given away for free all over the city, and I had a really good time working with these writers and hold them dear to my heart.
Well, I have to say, my old mentor from Knightswood Secondary School, Bob Reid, who was head of music there when I was there, and who sadly died only a few weeks ago, and it brought back just how important he was, not just to me, but to lots of other people. We would never have become musicians or had music as such an important part of our lives without him. He had a real flair for the creative task plus practicality at all times.
I think once again it goes to my son. It goes right back to, strangely enough, when my son was a baby. When I was changing his nappy, just to kind of keep him occupied, keep him interested and distracted during the process, I used to sing him the Monty Python Philosopher's Song. And it worked in terms of keeping him distracted, and I just wondered what seeds it planted, because he started to study philosophy at secondary school. We always talked to him from a sort of philosophical perspective. We didn't sort of hand down ideas, we always encouraged him to break down ideas. It's made him a phenomenally difficult person to argue with, but it means that he is someone who sees the ideas for their own value, rather than accepting something just because it was told to him by someone in a position of authority or a position of some accorded respect.
The particular inspiration for this poem was I was actually away in Ardnamurchan, staying in this amazing cottage by my friend Ali, that was owned by my friend Ali, and I was actually trying to think about how in times of great difficulty, great stress, we have to take a long view. And I was talking to my good friend, one of my best friends in the world, Ali Smith, and she said to me, the long view, call it the long view. And that was really great. So I kind of took that idea of the long view and ran with it, because Scotland as a country has had such a complex past and complex relationship with the rest of the United Kingdom, and we had, one referendum, and there's potentially another one coming up, although who knows what's going to be happening now in these particular days of coronavirus. But I was thinking that in any situation of difficulty, it's often wise to take a long view, and then that meant that the whole poem took a long view over all sorts of things, over my past, over the Highland clearances comes up in the poem when people were burnt out of their croft and moved out of their land. There's quite a lot of Scottish history in the poem, as well as Scotland's potential future.
I was really touched by these small bouquets of flowers for dead children and for women who had miscarried, using the area almost as a place of remembrance. And it got me thinking about the meaning of the word caretaker. Who takes care of us in a park? We always think of a caretaker being someone who looks after the bushes and the grass and tidies away the rubbish. But what in a new future if we imagined it being someone that was trained to take care of all of our needs, our emotional, our mental health needs, and what if all our public parks had a place of remembrance?
Has it had any impact on my view of the future? Well, there's still an Etonian in number 10 who has taken his sweet time about making any positive statements in the current crisis. When you look at other people around the world and the way that it has been handled, it seems a lot more definite. The fact that that's just a coffin being wheeled past my house. The fact that you know, people who rent are in some sort of doubt about what their immediate future will be. The owners of small businesses who are in enough trouble anyway because of Brexit. I completely agree. Those of you shouting at your screens now, he has no control over the biological process of a virus, but he certainly has control over how we respond to that, and been found wanting. So my view of the future. Ask me in a year.
Well, apart from the current health crisis, I must say I'm driven almost to despair by the fact that here I am more than 50 years after I left secondary school, that there's another crisis about funding instrumental teaching and the whole approach and sidelining of arts in education. It really has to be central. It seems that all our political parties, right and left, I don't make any sectarian distinctions here, but all of them absolutely love it when creative artists can be cited in terms of supporting their cause and supporting their values and going along with it. They absolutely love it. But where is it when it comes down to the practicalities of funding and really leading the way with what education can and should be, I think, not just in Scotland, of course, everywhere. And thank you for the opportunity to contribute to this. It was, in the end, a lot of fun.
It did. It made me think that there is reason to be optimistic, because a lot of our fear at the response to social media has been the fact that we are unused to it, but our kids are growing up with it, and I think instinctively they are learning how to parse that information, but it would be wise and beneficial if we taught them more formally how to break down information, how to understand ideas. And to me, the most important element is that it becomes about the ideas themselves and not who is telling you the ideas. I think we're reaching a stage in politics where we're moving beyond party politics. We're certainly seeing the limits and the problems of a first-past-the-post electoral system. But mainly I think it's this partisanship that's dangerous, that people just see it as being all about making sure their side is vindicated rather than evaluating whether an idea would be beneficial to us as a society. And the sort of nightmare scenario is that we go down the path of the Americans, where you have this absolutely insane hyper-partisanship where that is practiced in just the worst kind of bad faith and disingenuousness by, in particular, the Republicans. And I feel optimistic that we will be moving in Scotland to a better kind of politics already. We have a less adversarial parliamentary system, but if we can teach our young people how to think, then we will equip them to evaluate ideas on their merits instead of just waving flags.
It had an impact on my view of the future, writing the poem, in the sense that that day in the Scottish Parliament they had invited all the children that were born on July the 1st 20 years ago to come, and they were all sat there, nearly 100 of them, and 20-year-olds, and it was all their birthday. I'd never been with people and they all shared the same birthday before like that. It was kind of cool. And I also thought they were really amazing young people, and I thought, you know, young people are our future, and we've never lived, or I felt in my course of my lifetime, where I felt more consoled and more hopeful about the generation of young people that exists, all the Gretas, all the wee Gretas out and about the place, all over the world. We are kind of really dependent on them now. My generation has made a mess of the world, and the generation after me. And we really need our young people to be caretakers of this world of ours. This particular time that we're living in right now, with this coronavirus feels like a massive wake-up call to the whole world, and there's certain things that are coming about as a result of it that must be surely silver linings, certain changes that we actually need to all make in our lives, you know, travel less, work at home more, be mindful of what we're buying to eat, be not waste things, actually manage to find a way of being creative and inventive in different digital ways like we're doing right now. All of these things are kind of silver linings, and there have to be silver linings because we're all wide sick. But young people, writing the poem made me actually think and feel hopeful about that generation of young people, because they really, really do care. They care about the planet and they care about this old world of ours.
What's the future going to bring to us all? I'm writing this, talking to you now under lockdown. We don't know what's going to happen next, but I still have faith in the future. I have faith that we can make a good future if we work together. We've seen that we're a joined up world, and if we don't pull together it won't work. So I have faith that we'll get through this, and I hope you're all well and wish you well, and until next time, bye bye.
Bonus content, me singing the Philosopher's Song, for which I can only apologise. Immanuel Kant was a real pissant, was very rarely stable. Heidegger was a boozy beggar who could think you under the table. David Hume could out-consume William Friedrich Hegel, and Wittgenstein was a beery swine who was twice as slush as Schlegel. There's nothing Nietzsche couldn't teach you about the raising of the wrist. Socrates himself was permanently pissed. John Soot built of his own free will, and half a pint shandy was regularly ill. Plato they say could stick it away, have a crate of whiskey every day. Aristotle was a bug from the bottle, and Hobbes was fond of his dram. And René Descartes was a drunken fart, I drink therefore I am. Socrates himself is particularly missed, a lovely little thinker but a bugger when he's pissed.